Hey, welcome back to Chasing the Sun. I am Janie and Eric. If you're thinking of traveling to different parts of Vietnam, we will give you an introduction to all the different regions of Vietnam, from the south to the north and the central regions.
Yep, we've been to all parts and we will share with you our experience so that you can be informed and can decide for yourself what you want to visit. So we've been to Vietnam quite a few times now. We wanted to make this video to give you a travel guide if you're traveling throughout Vietnam. Technically speaking, Vietnam has actually 8 different regions, but for travelers, we want to simplify this and let's just talk about 3 regions: the north, the central, and the south. We won't dive into details, you have Wikipedia for that, but we will focus on the topics that help travelers, like weather, language, food, and the different characteristics of each region from a traveler's perspective. Okay, so weather-wise, northern Vietnam has humid subtropical climates with 4 distinct seasons, unlike the other parts of Vietnam. Spring is typically between January and March, and then summer is kind of April to July. Autumn is August to October, and then winter is November to January. Now, central Vietnam, if you move down a little bit, has tropical monsoon climate with 2 seasons. It's the rainy and cold, which happens between November and February, and then dry and hot is from March to October. Then southern Vietnam, if you move down there, has a tropical savanna type of climate with 2 seasons. Rainy, which is May to September, and then kind of dry and hot all year. And that's kind of between 25 to 38 degrees. So it's relatively speaking, it's still very hot when you compare it to North America, even in the winter. As you can see, for a small country, the weather is quite varied. The north is colder, definitely, with more humidity, we notice, whereas the south is warmer and drier. Now, having said this is all relative to Vietnam itself. You can't really compare that to North America. We've been back to Vietnam in the winter, and it's actually very pleasant. It feels like our spring and our summer. If you are planning to travel the entire country, then your best bet for good weather would probably be between February to April. Okay, so let's talk about the characteristic differences of each region. The difference in geography, the city feel, the attractions is just as varied as it is their food throughout the region. The northern region is home to their capital, Hanoi, so it's much more of a political city. Their busy port city, Haiphong, which is just about an hour and a half away from Hanoi, and of course the Ha Long Bay area, which boasts Vietnam's most stunning and unique scenery. Hanoi is a government town, and you will get more history and ancient architecture here. I found that there were more tourist attractions in Hanoi available than Ho Chi Minh, but less nightlife options. So it depends what you want. It's definitely a bustling city and only a little bit smaller than Ho Chi Minh itself. I think it's about 8 million in population. If you have time though when you're in the north, we would highly recommend that you take a side trip out of the city, the bustling city of Hanoi, to experience the stunning and surreal natural landscapes. And there's many options around. You can either go to Ninh Binh, which is only a day trip away and be there and back, or take a cruise in the Ha Long Bay area, which would need at least a weekend to do it justice. If you really want to dive into that, we would recommend 5 to 7 days. They both have similar sceneries with the jagged mountains and the water. Ninh Binh actually has a river through it, and Ha Long Bay is actually in the ocean, but they're completely different from the chaotic city experience, which is very cool. We will be doing separate videos for both of these excursions, so make sure you get subscribed to get notified when those come out. Another great trip we would highly recommend you to go to are the highlands at the northwest tip of Vietnam. They're known for the jagged mountains rising over sweeping green valleys and rice fields. It's just serene. The inhabitants here is very interesting. They're mostly ethnic minority hill tribes. And they're somewhat isolated from civilization. So with that, you'll get a completely different experience altogether. The popular tourism destination here is Sapa, where you'll find rice terraces set in the mountains with communities of ethnic minorities. So that's a very cool experience from the busy Hanoi life. The central region has many great coastal cities worth checking out if you're into beaches. What I love about this region is that the cities are much smaller than Hanoi in the north or Ho Chi Minh in the south. So you'll find that it's not as hectic and people are friendlier. Da Nang, which is the biggest city in the central region, has only like under a million people, just under a million, compared to 8 or 9 million in Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh. There's a lot of culture and history here though to take in because Hue, which is about an hour and a half from Da Nang, was actually the former capital and imperial city in the 1800s right to about 1940. The imperial city is very much intact, complete with the city walls, and is definitely worth it if you're out in Hue. And because this was the capital, there are also many burial sites and tombs of the old emperors throughout the years that you can visit. Another very interesting town, if you're interested in history and culture, is Hoi An, which was a major trading center for the Chinese and Japanese traders in the mid-16th century. You'll see the architectural influences that the Chinese and Japanese have here just by walking through the very well-preserved Old Town district. That should be on a must-visit for you if you're in Hoi An. If you're looking for beach type of vacations, then Nha Trang would be the place. You'll find good scuba diving sites here, along with great beach resorts. Nha Trang is also known as the seafood capital of Vietnam, so definitely a destination for food lovers. The southern region is where you'll find, of course, Ho Chi Minh City, the biggest city. It's also commonly referred to as Saigon. You'll see it in signs and in names, so just want to point that out in case you weren't aware. It is Vietnam's most populated city at 9 million people and serves as the capital during the French rule. If Hanoi is the political center, then Ho Chi Minh is definitely the financial center, and Ho Chi Minh is probably the most cosmopolitan city in Vietnam. And as such, you'll find many nightlife options like bars and nightclubs and live music venues. You'll also find many great restaurants and eateries. But if you're looking for more touristy things to do, then it's probably a bit more disappointing because there's just not that many attractions. Now, they do have the War Remnants Museum, which is definitely worth visiting. Other than that, worthwhile day trips would be the Mekong Delta, which you can see the floating markets, very interesting, and also Vung Tau, which is just kind of southeast and it's right by the beach, so good beaches and also seafood if that's what you're looking for. Although all of Vietnam speak Vietnamese, they do have their own dialects between the three main regions. For instance, Janie is from the south and I'm from the north, and although my Vietnamese is not fluent, I can still tell the difference between the regions. So that shows you the extreme between the two. The central region also has their own dialect and is often hard for someone from the north or the south to understand. Sometimes these differences are just slight variations of sound, but other times they would actually use completely different words to mean the same thing, so you can imagine how confusing that is. But if you're not planning to learn the language when you're here, then it's not a big deal. If you are planning to use the English though to get around, then I would say most locals won't understand you. So it's best to stay in the touristy areas or the more international type of hotels and fancier restaurants, because that's where they'll hire people that speak English well. You can also carry around Google Translate or another language app for easy translation. Now, if you are planning to commute around in English, then we would recommend this video where we gave you tips on how to use rideshare apps, which are all in complete English, so you don't have to know how to type in Vietnamese. Vietnam is an amazing country for food lovers because there's just so much variety through the different regions. There may be common dishes throughout the country, but different regions will have their own take on it. And of course, there will be some dishes that you can only find in that region. So our tip here for food lovers is to just go and try anything that you see is interesting. The Northerners definitely like to use black pepper in place of chili, and they blend sweet, salty, spicy, bitter, and sour flavors very uniquely for a lightly balanced taste. The food in the central region are colorful, they're decorative and complex. They are known for their spices and strong, bold flavors. The portions are smaller though, but what you'll find is that they serve a number of courses throughout, like appetizer size, so they get many small dishes. The Southerners love to use garlic, shallots, and lots of herbs in their dishes. I've never seen so many different herbs in my life than in the South. being open to the coast, they will have more seafood dishes like crab, fish, squid, and shrimp. Now, Southerners prefer sweet and spicy for their taste. Now, if you are someone who hasn't been to many second and third world countries, then you should definitely get your vaccine shots before going to Vietnam. These will be for things like hepatitis and typhoid, but your doctor will be able to advise you on that better. If you have stayed in first world countries most of your life, then chances are your stomach will be very clean and you'll be probably attracting some stomach bugs on your first visit to Vietnam. I know I did, but it wasn't anything major. Maybe you might get an upset stomach and diarrhea. If you really want to avoid this, then some tips here would be to not to drink the local water, definitely. Use bottled water. And also don't drink with ice in it. So don't drink any drinks with ice in it because a lot of times they'll use the local water to make the ice. Also, you can stick with upscale restaurants and international establishments and definitely stay away from the street stalls. But of course, if you're a real food lover, then we would highly recommend the opposite because street stalls and small shops is where you get the most authentic flavors and the most authentic experience. For us, we've been back enough times to have gotten used to it, and being food lovers, we would rather risk that in exchange for that full authentic experience.
So we hope you enjoyed that video and that it will make your trip in Vietnam more enjoyable.
If you missed it, then we made some videos which will give you some tips on things that you need to know when you first arrive in Vietnam, like getting money exchange or getting internet data service for your mobile phone, and you can watch it right there.
Yes, and don't forget to like us and subscribe to the channel as we will bring you more videos of our Vietnam travel series.